Ready? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Special Finance Budget Enrollment Committee. I would like to call this meeting to order. Before we start the meeting, I would like to have a land acknowledgement. Everybody can stand up. Thank you. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Miigwech. Thank you. You may be seated. Before we go to the agenda, can we have a roll call, please?
You're in the room. Trustee Arts, are you online? Could you confirm?
Trustee Arts is present.
Thank you. Trustee Didavides is in the room. Trustee Hassan is in the room. Trustee Laskin is in the room. Trustee Lee? Trustee Lee is not online. And Trustee McLean is present. We also have the chair, additional trustees to confirm. Trustee King, Trustee Williams. If you could confirm that
Here.
you're online. Thank you.
Trustee Williams is here.
Thank you. Trustee King?
Yes, I'm here as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Denise. Moving along the agenda, item number 2, declarations of possible conflict of interest. Trustees? Go ahead, Trustee Laskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As my daughter is a teacher with the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, I will not be voting on elementary teachers staffing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Trustee Laskin. Any other trustees? Item number 3, delegations. Since this is special FPAC and we have decided that we will not be having any delegations until 26th.
Sorry, let's go ahead.
Or defer to the item on the agenda. He's speaking to the agenda item of IPAC.
All right, so I'm happy to refer the item to next month, to move to refer the item to next month.
Denise, so Vice Chair Didavides wants to refer this to the next meeting. The delegation, he wants to refer it to the next meeting. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Can you not just move to refer the item to the next meeting? No? It's majority, right?
Yeah. Denise, can we go on recess for next 2 minutes?
Sorry?
A recess for 2 minutes? Yeah. He's a co-chair. He's a co-chair, right? Omar? Yes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the patience. We are back in session, and as a chair, I'll make Omar as a delegate. So, Omar, we are here to hear you as a delegate. Is he there?
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yep, I am here.
Go ahead. What's your point of order?
Mr. Chair, the ICCAC item is on the agenda, and he's the chair of the ICCAC. So wouldn't he be speaking into that item as the chair of the committee as opposed to the delegate? We have never had chairs of the committees have to sign up as delegate to as a delegate to come and speak. So the agenda, it's already on the agenda item. It was moved from another committee to this. Why would he not speak at that item?
Thank you, Trustee Shan. Mr. Omar was sent an email by staff saying that he will be speaking as a delegate. There was no response back from Mr. Omar on this.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just asking, why would he have to speak as a delegate? Is the question. Are you able to clarify why this particular committee chair needs to sign up as a delegate to speak? Why would the staff request that when all committee chairs from advisory committees can come and speak to the reports that they are bringing? We already did that once, and we made a mistake in the last committee and sent it back to this committee. So the same process as last time would follow here.
Thank you, Trustee Shan. Dennis, you want to speak on this? Did he presented this in the past?
Through the chair, Mr. Khan presented the ICCAC report at PPC last week as chair of the committee. At PSSC, sorry.
Trustee Shan?
Yes, and that item was referred from that committee to this committee. So naturally, the same item has been moved by us to this committee. That's our choice. It was not the choice of Mr. Khan. So it was our choice as a board to move that item to this so that we can actually have this discussion here. So it's a continuation of the item. So therefore, the chair continues to provide that information, because right now we would have that item and would not have the input of the chair as it relates to FPEC.
Trustee Shan, it's the chair's call. If you want to challenge it, please do so. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to challenge the decision, because this is not fair for an equity-seeking group that is chairing the committee, and it sets a dangerous precedent that we will be doing this to any committee at all. No disrespect, I would like to challenge the chair.
Thank you, Trustee Shan.
Denise, this is a challenge to the chair. Do I take the mic?
We are back live. Trustee Shan, just to confirm, are you challenging chair's decision?
Yes, I would like to challenge the decision, Chair.
Denise?
Chair or acting chair, may other trustees comment prior to a vote on the challenge? Thank you.
Sorry, trustees, I just need a minute while staff give me some direction on this. I'll answer your question in a second, Trustee Arhart. Sorry, while the chair is being challenged, I'll ask us to go into recess for another minute, okay? Thank you, and thank you everyone for your patience. The ruling of the chair has been challenged. There's no debate on the challenge. The only voting members are FPEC members. To clarify, the ruling of the chair is that the deputant was notified and given notice that they were going to come in and speak not as a committee co-chair, but as a deputant. That ruling has been challenged. So we'll go into a vote. You can ask a clarifying question. You can't speak to the item.
No, thank you. Through the chair. So the chair has determined that he can't speak as a delegate or that he can't speak to the agenda item.
The chair has determined that either way, Mr. Can will be speaking to the item. It's his status. As a delegate, you get 5 minutes and you can only speak to the item once every 12 months. As co-chair reporting from one of our CACs, you're able to come in and speak without a time limit, and you speak on behalf of the committee. Does that clarify your question?
So the chair ruled he can't be a delegate, and this has nothing to do with his ability to speak to the report.
The chair ruled that he can't speak as a committee co-chair, cannot, that he is speaking as a delegate.
Sorry, point of order.
Go ahead.
He did not register
clarify.
as a delegate. There is no delegation registration
Sorry, Trustee Dawson.
form.
So let me just clarifying questions on the vote, not on the content of it. If you want to try that again, if you have a clarifying question on the vote that we're going to take as soon as.
Okay. Can I please clarify that we are voting, or the committee is voting on the fact
Well,
that...
that's what I was doing. So Trustee Dawson, if you let me finish that, because I think it's clear for you, but you're not a committee member, right? So I'll go back to Trustee McLean. Is the question answered for you?
So I just want to make sure I understand what he ruled. So he ruled that if Mr. Khan is going to speak tonight, he has to speak as a delegate.
Yes.
And not be able to speak to the report agenda item
5.1?
4.1. He can't speak to 4.1, 4.5?
Yeah, 5.1.
5.1, sorry, thank you. So he can't speak to 5.1, but if he wants to speak, he has to speak as a delegate, and that's the ruling of the chair.
That's the ruling of the chair.
And Mr.
To staff, if you want to clarify the question, otherwise I want to get to the vote.
Mr. Chair, Trustee Shan is asking to overturn the decision of the chair, and that is what you're voting on, whether to overturn that decision.
Mr. Can would still get to speak, just to make sure you understand that, Trustee McLean. It's just his status. Okay? Any further questions? I really want to get to this vote so we can get to the deputation. Okay, so we'll open, before we do that, do I take a vote as well? I vote, okay. Does the chair have a vote? Yes, as well, okay. So we'll open up the vote. It will be a verbal vote for the members of the FBAC committee.
So what's yes and no? What's yes?
Uphold the chair.
To uphold the chair, okay. Thank
Yes is to uphold the chair. No is against the ruling of the chair. The vote is now open.
You want to call the members? Trustee?
Oh, we call them? Sure. I'll just go through the list. Trustee Patel.
In favor.
Trustee Arts. Sorry, Trustee Arts.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. It's a little noisy here. Sorry, which vote is for which vote is for what?
Yes is to uphold the chair. No is against the ruling of the chair.
Okay, no.
Nope. I'm next on the list. Trustee Dovitis is a no. Trustee Hassan?
In favor.
Trustee Hassan in favor. Trustee Laskin?
No.
Trustee Lee?
Uphold.
Trustee McLean?
No.
Okay.
Chair and vice chair?
What's the tally?
The chair and the vice chair.
Chair and vice.
Excuse me, and thank you. Trustee Shan?
No.
Trustee Cherneslin?
I don't think she's on.
She's not online, so we'll mark her as absent. And now the vote is closed.
The vote is closed. The decision of the chair has been overturned.
So the decision of the chair has been overturned. I'll pass it back to the chair.
He will speak as ICC.
Thank you, Vice Chair Didibides. So now we will hear we'll be moving on item number 4 now. Community Advisory Committee Report, 4.1, Special Education Advisory Committee Report. And who is presenting?
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Nora Green, and I'm the Inclusion Action in Ontario representative on the Special Education Advisory Committee. I've been asked today by our chair, David Lepofsky, to speak today about a motion SEAC passed regarding special education budget. The motion reads, SEAC recommends to the TDSB trustees that the forthcoming TDSB budget should ensure that there are no cuts to services, supports, learning opportunities, or resources for students with special education needs. Those students require an increase to the services, supports, and staffing provided for them. I understand that over the past few years, the declining enrollment of the board has contributed to previous cuts made to special education staff and services. I also understand that the number of students receiving special education programs and services has also declined. I believe that this data may make this response sound appropriate. However, I urge you to consider some additional information regarding the number of students currently being served by special education and the level of service delivery to these students. First and foremost, I would like to draw your attention to the 2022 Stats Canada report on disability and accessibility in Canada. The report states that 20% of Canadian youth aged 15 to 24 identified as having a disability. Last year's special education report to trustees indicated that 17% of students were receiving services from special education. The Stats Canada report is an indicator that the number of students in need of services may not necessarily be in decline. Furthermore, I would like the trustees to consider how students receiving special education services perform given the current level of service they have been receiving. Last year, SEAC passed a motion requesting that service data be provided to trustees before they voted on the budget for the 2023-2024 school year. Included in the data request was EQAO performance for students receiving special education services. It is essential to acknowledge that while our board's performance on EQAO assessments is better than the provincial average for all students of the board at all 3 grade levels, it falls below the provincial average for students receiving special education services at all 3 grade levels. This discrepancy indicates that additional resources and support are required to bridge this gap and provide these students with an equal opportunity to succeed. I would also like to share with the committee that in the fall, when senior staff requested that SEAC associations identify barriers students receiving special education were experiencing, The majority of the associations indicated that they were concerned about students with disabilities being excluded from school. There was an increasing concern from associations about students being denied the ability to register, students being denied access to school following registration, which was difficult for staff to track because of the use of the general attendance codes. There are students on partial and modified days, and students being excluded from events. Our concern as a committee is that any potential cuts would exacerbate the situation. Lastly, I would like to emphasize that as a provincial service provider, the board has a responsibility under the Ontario Human Rights Code to accommodate students with disabilities to the point of undue hardship. By reducing funding for special education students, we risk failing to meet this obligation and denying these students the accommodations they require to fully participate in their education. Every student deserves an inclusive and accessible learning environment. SEAC's motion prioritizes the needs of students receiving special education services and students who identify as disabled. The committee communicates that it has concerns regarding the current level of service being provided by the current funding. Cuts will certainly contribute to additional barriers. Anecdotally, I must share I knew a former trustee who told me that when he canvassed his constituents and asked how they were experiencing the local school, that trustee said that most of the families were very happy at their local schools, and the ones that had concerns had special education students. So my question to you as trustees would be, if you reflected upon your emails and your calls from your constituents, what percentage and proportion of the contact of families reaching out to you is asking for supports and services for children who are struggling in the system? So I guess, now I've gotten carried away. I ask you to think about your stories, and I ask you to think whether or not students receiving special education services and students who identify as disabled have the same access to opportunities as other students. The Ontario Human Rights Code guarantees the right to equal treatment and services without discrimination on the ground of disability. The scope of educational services defined in the OHRC's accessible education for students with disabilities includes the mastery of knowledge, academic standards, evaluation, and accreditation. It also encompasses the development of a student's personality, talents, and mental and physical abilities to their fullest potential, and may include co-instructional activities such as school-related sports, arts, cultural activities, and school functions and field trips. Will the board be able to provide this if funding to special education is cut? So to restate SEAC's motion, SEAC recommends to the TDSB trustees that the forthcoming TDSB budget should ensure that there are no cuts to services, supports, learning opportunities, or resources for students with special education needs. Those students require an increase to their services, supports, and staffing provided for them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your delegation. If you can stay behind, trustees have some questions for you. Trustee Laskin, go ahead.
And thank you for speaking to us tonight. I wondered if you had a chance to see the staffing numbers that were being recommended in the report for tonight.
No, I have not.
Okay, so just so you know, the only thing before us tonight is staffing.
Okay.
And in the staff report, elementary teacher last year was 1493.5. In the report, it's gone up to 1495.5. Secondary teacher last year was 467. In the report, it's gone up to 475. Last year, support staff was 2799. In the report, it's gone up to 2803. So the only thing before us tonight are the staffing levels.
Right.
When it comes time to the debate, I will refer the rest of your motion to staff for consideration and their options on March 19th. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. We have Trustee Erhan.
Oh, so my apologies, Chair. That was from a previous dialogue. I'll withdraw for this. Thanks very much for the delegation.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. Any other trustees? Trustee Shan? Trustee Shan?
Sorry, that was from before.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Arts?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nora, for your presentation. It was very succinct. I just wanted to highlight for trustees, actually, some of the good discussions that have been happening at the budget working group for the Special Education Advisory Committee, and invite trustees to come attend SEAC's meeting. The next SEAC meeting is on Monday, March 18th at 7 p.m. What the working group, the budget working group has asked from staff, from the finance staff and from the special education staff is for the presentation of a program-based budget. So I can't speak to exactly what this will look like, but what was asked of staff was, instead of the usual, numbers of teachers, numbers of EAs for the system, for staff to outline, what does program delivery look like in the TDSB? How do we serve student needs in the regular classroom, in specialized education classes, in congregated sites? And what are the budget implications of doing that? I think we're all aware that not just our board, but all boards have to spend more than the special education allocation to meet special education needs in the system. And it fluctuates from year to year, but it's hard for our advocates and sometimes even for trustees to get a sense of what that means in terms of program delivery. So I think it will be very interesting. I think it'll be a really good opportunity to see a budget presentation and discussion from a different perspective than we normally have. And that's happening on Monday, March 18th.
Trustee Arts, do you need a response from the delegate, or it's just a comment?
That was just a comment. Again, I want to say thank you very much to Ms. Green for coming.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Thank you. Thank you, Nora, for your presentation.
Please.
Sorry, Nora.
For the-
You got
it's
one
not-
more trustee.
It's not for. Just 4.1 is on the, so I can ask questions of staff, right? Like, this is what, like, she didn't delegate, like,
Yes, now that she's left, she's presented it. Now we can ask questions of staff.
right, okay, thank you. I would like to, through the chair, I would like to ask the question of Associate Director Sarisco regarding the delegates' reference to staffing and EQAO results, and that our results for students with special education needs are below that of the provincial standards. And I was wondering, do we attribute that to our staffing levels?
Thank you, and through the chair to Trustee McLean. Trustee McLean, I think that's a very complex analysis that would need to occur. That would include a program evaluation of what Trustee Arts was referring to in how program is delivered to students. It would be, I think, very preliminary to be saying that student outcomes is related exclusively to staffing levels. There are interventions, evidence-based programs. Certainly staffing would be a component, but I think that EQA results would be a multi-factored analysis, or many factors, many variables contributing to outcomes.
Thank you, and I'll follow up through the chair. But isn't that the point of the motion, that they sent the motion, they're concerned about results, and asked, so like the committee itself is doing its work and they're concerned about this specific area. Is this not, so I'll go about it differently then. Are we concerned about the results, the EQA results? And if so, without trying to go down a rabbit hole that figures out exactly why, what are we doing proactively as a system to try to ensure that our students are doing better and that we're helping them to the best of our ability and helping them maximize their academic potential, so that in a perfect world, those results will not only meet but ultimately exceed the provincial standards.
Thank you, and through the chair to Trustee McLean. Trustee McLean, let me reassure you, absolutely, staff are concerned that our EQAO achievement for students with special education needs is less than the province. We want every single one of our students with disabilities and special education needs to reach their highest potential and to certainly exceed the provincial average. The board has been working very diligently, and I'm going to say in a forward-thinking manner, trying to disrupt outcomes that show disproportionality, like de-streaming, as an example. Like asking for documentation before students create IEPs, before teams create IEPs for students. So there are some elements that have already been in place. Moving forward with the department that I have the fortune to be working alongside, we are wanting to look at, and Ms. Green is very passionate about inclusion, and part of the request to be asking about staffing levels is to be analyzing contained class programs and how they're staffed compared to mainstream classes. And they would like to better analyze the outcomes for students in those two models. So we want to work alongside SEAC to be posing that question. We're wanting also to be exploring evidence-based programs for reading intervention that is connected to the study Right to Read. So please know there will be lots more activity from the department and coming to the Board of Trustees for, I'm going to say, rearrangement of investment to, again, try and close disproportionate outcomes and have our students achieving higher than the provincial average.
Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Director. Thank you, Trustee McLean. We have Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if others want to speak before I would move these recommendations, but my plan would be to, because the only thing that's before us tonight is the staffing, and each of those are not seen as cuts to this year. They're all more than last year. I was wondering about, and I would like staff's opinion on this, but I was thinking about moving the whole recommendation in its entirety to staff for consideration when they bring us back the options on March 19th.
Thank you, Trustee.
Thank you, and through the chair, that works for staff. We will consider it if that motion is moved. Thank you.
Then, Mr. Chair, I would be looking for a seconder to move that.
Trustee Arzo, second.
So we got a lot. So then, Mr. Chair, I don't know if we have to have more discussion, but I'm happy to have moved that. And for simplicity's sake, Ms. Joseph Dowers, I don't know if you need me to write anything. It would just be referred to staff for consideration on March 19th. Thank you very much.
We have a motion on the floor. Trustee Laskin and seconded by Vice Chair Ditapides. Anybody else?
New question.
You ready?
On the motion.
Yes. No, we're doing discussion. There's a question on the motion. We have speakers list. Okay. There is. Okay. So now we have motion online. Trustee Shan, go ahead if you have a question on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, Trustee Laskin mentioned a couple of times that the proposal today has increase in staffing compared to last year. I would like the staff to through you. I would like to ask the staff to say, I know it's based on more enrollment projection. So per student, would that still be an increase in staffing when the enrollment is adjusted, or would it be decrease in staffing when you adjust for the increase in enrollment?
Thank you, Trustee Shan. Associate Director Seshi.
Sorry, Nathan, I had a hard time understanding you. Or maybe you can.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just asking the increase in staffing that is being projected for this budget, is that based on increased enrollment?
Thank you. And through the chair, the increase in staffing that's been recommended this evening is based on the needs of the department. And it does, in fact, coincide with an increase in enrollment as well, but is based on need.
Okay, so just to make sure that I understand this correctly, we are projecting more staff because we are also projecting more enrollment. But I would like to know if you adjust for if you control for the increase in enrollment, would we have higher percentage of staff next year or lower percentage of staff next year? Would that be something that could be calculated and told us? So, because I'm a bit concerned by assuming that we are going to have more staff next year as opposed to this year, just without contextualizing increased enrollment.
That's not.
Associate Director Shishko, go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair, Patel, to Trustee Shan. Trustee Shan, the numbers that are before you again reflect a general increase in enrollment for the board, which is inclusive of our students with special education needs. But under the leadership of Nandy Palmer and myself and department centrally assigned principals, we do look at the needs of each of our programs. So there are going to be additional allocations to particular programs where we feel additional support is required. So it's not strictly an enrollment calculation. It is an analysis, again, of supporting our students and being innovative with our programs for the goal of closing disproportionate outcomes. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Associate Director. Trustee Shan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Doesn't quite answer the question I was asking. I'm just asking, maybe it's something that can be followed up later. Does the percentage of increase in staffing match the percentage of enrollment that we are expecting in terms of increase? Because I'm just trying to see if the net result is increase in staffing or decrease in staffing. Because just the number of staff itself wouldn't tell us what that means, because it also is connected to enrollment. So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll follow up later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Shan. I think Madam Director wants to speak on this.
Thank you very much. Just to build on the responses offered by my colleagues, yes, there is an increase in service to students with special education needs through the numbers presented in the report before you this evening.
Thank you, Madam Director. Trustee Shan, do you have anything more?
Thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Shan. We have Trustee Erhard.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question related to the agenda item more broadly, not related to the motion. Are we still able to do that, Chair?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Erhard. Any other trustees before we go to vote? Seeing and hearing none, can we open the vote? On e-scribe, right? Okay.
Arts in favor.
Shan in favor.
In favor, please.
Trustee Lee, how do you vote? And Vice Chair Shan.
So in favor. Shan in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Lee. Trustee Lee. Mark him absent. And the motion is carried. We need mover and seconder for this item. It's done. Agenda item number 5.1, Inner City Community Advisory Committee. And I believe Omar Khan is speaking to this.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Is he online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, Omar.
Okay, yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks for having me as a reporter, not a delegate. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Omar Khan. I am the ICCAC Community Co-Chair. I was here 1 year ago advocating for more community support workers to better support model schools and high LOI high schools. So I'm back now to update you on this topic and to specifically advocate for Part A of the motion that you see before you today. The other parts of the motion were passed by PSSC, and they referred the budget part, which I'll just read right now, right Part A right out loud. Through the budget cycle, the board explored the option of increasing the allocation of CSWs so that they cover 4 schools on average, down from the current 6.25 schools average per CSW. So last year after I spoke here, I heard from trustees who didn't really know what community support workers do. And so community support workers work in model schools, and those are the top 150 or so elementary schools on the Learning Opportunities Index. These are schools where challenges like poverty affect many families in the community. So in the motion before you today, to talk a bit more about what the CSWs do, the service expectations of CSWs are in there. I think you're only seeing this one part, but you have it, the whole motion, in your package. And those expectations include regular communication and updates with principal and the school council, planning and outlining what and how the CSW will be supporting the school and the school council initiatives, projects, and activities, a monthly newsletter outlining parent caregiver engagement initiatives, a standardized schedule for each school on a rotational basis, as CSWs are required to be at a school location a minimum of once per week, attendance at school council meetings, and an early literacy and numeracy initiative that is implemented at the school or learning center level. So one expectation on that list is being on site once a week. So our committee, ICCAC, knows that CSWs want to be on site at each of their schools as much as possible. And even once a week, many CSWs have told us is not enough to do justice to the needs of the school community. But on average, CSWs right now are supporting over 6 schools at the same time. And there are some that are supporting 10, upwards of 10 schools at the same time. So think of an area like Scarborough, where the schools are quite spread out. Like, how is it even possible for a CSW to realistically visit and support 6 or more schools in 1 week? Okay, so since I saw all of you last year, The Parent and Caregiver Engagement Office, which houses the CSW program, has increased CSW accountability and evaluation, which you can read more about in the motion. It's all there. But here at FEC, I wanted to focus on finances. So, and I want to talk about the benefits we see coming from CSW work and what that is worth. So first, we all know students do better with parent involvement. We know that. And CSWs, like the primary thing is getting parents more involved, both informally, but also through the establishment of effective school councils. And second, and the one I really want to emphasize is, the board is struggling with underfunding from the province. And I've been told in some of the schools that I'm connected with that we should be looking for external supports from local community as much as we can. So this is the key role of CSWs in model schools where parent involvement is less. I was with a model school principal last week who told me that it's her CSW that makes key connections to local agencies and helps bring in initiatives to support our students. So the Center for Disease Control in the US has done a number of studies on the payback of investing in various programming for families like those in high LOI schools, including parent supports and other types of programs that CSWs help make happen. And so for every dollar invested, the return that they've found is between like $2 and $15 for some work. And so this is how I want you to look at CSWs. For every dollar you invest, the returns they bring to the school community are immense and so needed in our highest LOI schools, especially given ministry underfunding and the current affordability crisis. So on the budget, you're probably all wondering, okay, but where is this money going to come from? So the TDSB has a strategic budget driver that says provide equity of access to learning opportunities for all students. And so one source of funding to support such a budget driver is the ministry's GSN's Learning Opportunities Grant Demographic Allocation, or the LOG-DA. And so just to quote from the ministry, the demographic allocation provides funding based on social and economic indicators that are associated with students facing barriers to success. This allocation supports school boards in offering a wide range of programs tailored to the local needs of their students. Examples of programs include provision of nutrition programs, homework clubs, reading recovery, and withdrawal for individualized support. End quote. So in the last year, the LOG-DA was about $140 million. But because this money is unsweatered, the board doesn't need to report on how this money is spent. But multiple analyses over the last 10 years have shown that maybe at most 50% or around 70 million of this money is spent on equity-related programs like model schools and CSWs that fit the LOG-DA description from the province. The rest of the money goes into the general fund. But the LOG-DA money should not be used as a slush fund for non-equity related expenses. LOG-DA money should not be used to supplement gaps in ministry funding. The ministry should pay that, obviously, and I know we're all advocating for that. We think going from 24 CSWs, which is the number now, to 38 CSWs, which is what the Part A would suggest, maybe it'll cost around 1 million. But what we're asking for here is first to cost this out, to really explore this, so we get the math right. And if this cost is around 1 million, let's say, that's a small percentage of the LOG-DA money that is used to cover inadequate funding elsewhere. And it would be funding LOG-DA related work. So I just implore you, please pass Part A of this motion, get the good numbers from staff, and then discuss and debate at March 19th, at March 26th, and just please use the LOG-DA money for what it's intended for things like CSWs. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. We have a speakers list. We have Trustee Laskin.
To ask Omar a question.
No, to the staff, right?
It's for staff. Thank you.
Yes. Trustee Dawson, go ahead.
Thank you. I actually also have a question for staff, but I did want to thank Mr. Khan for his patience while we determined his status as a deliverer of information, and for his very thorough and well thought review of why this is very important. So thank you so much. But my question is to staff. So do I ask it now or?
We'll be calling you afterwards when we do
Okay.
staff questioning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Laskin, you have no questions for Omar, right?
Correct.
Good. Trustee Vice Chair Didavides, go ahead.
Hi, Omar. Thank you again for the presentation. Last year, there was a similar report that came to committee, to FBEC committee from the Inner City Community Advisory Committee. Can you remind us what that motion was at the time?
Yeah, through the chair, and thank you, Trustee Didavides. Yeah, so a year ago, I believe Trustee Didavides and Trustee Laskin sort of amended and amended a motion that we came to report on, asking staff to investigate the sort of the cost and what it would look like to have more CSWs, and in particular, some CSWs supporting at the highest LOI high schools. And that was supposed to be reported back in the fall, so last fall. ICCAC never saw that report, and I was looking through the FBEC meeting agendas for the last few months, and I haven't seen either. So yes, this is a similar request that came a year ago that we wanted costed out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And you asked my next question, which is whether or not the committee had heard it, but you stated that the committee hasn't sort of seen this report back yet.
No, we have not at ICCAC.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Didavides. So now, do you have anybody else? Sure. So we have questions for staff. Trustee Laskin, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think for Part A, we would have to again refer this to staff because we can't explore the option of increasing the allocation to 4 down from 6.25 unless we understand the numbers, and the numbers have to be part of the larger context. I will not move that motion now because I know other trustees have questions, but in order to accomplish A, I mean, we could vote on A, fine, that we explore other options, but this is something that staff would have to do and bring back to us on the 19th. That's my thought about it, but I'm happy to hear from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Associate Director, to speak on A.
Thank you, and through the chair, that is correct. Through the budget process, if it were to be explored through the budget process, staff would have to calculate based on the numbers that are included in this motion.
Trustee Laskin, anything else?
No, I'm looking forward to hearing from other colleagues before I move an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee
Or I guess
Laskin.
before I move a recommendation, because nothing is before us right now.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Trustee Dawson?
Thank you, and through the chair, I just wanted to show some, I'm not on this committee, but I did want to show some support for Trustee Laskin potentially referring Part A back to March 19th for our consideration. I did want to ask staff about the log DA budget and how that factors into this, and how do we ensure that pays for equity?
Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair. So as we look at the log grant, there are many different components of it. The portion that is intended to provide some flexibility to boards to be able to provide additional support is more than spent in these areas. And I know that that's something that trustees had asked staff to bring back. So it is something that we are able to provide. But I would say that we more than spend the law grant on the areas in which it is intended for.
Okay, thank you very much. That was my question.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. Anybody else on the list? Good. Good. Go ahead, Vice Chair Diabetes.
Thank you. So I had a couple of questions. So now this is to staff through the chair. There was a motion last year that asked for a report back. Can someone speak to where that may be at this point?
Associate Director Zucker, who is speaking to this?
Sorry, through the chair, trying to read lips.
I know. Madam
Thank you
Director,
very
go ahead.
much. Through the chair, I believe Associate Director Salmon is online.
Associate Director Salmon, are you online? Yeah, he's here.
I am. If you could repeat the sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
The question is in regards to a motion that was a report that was brought to us by the same committee on the same issue and had asked for a report back in the fall. That had been the motion that we had moved for them. So before I jump into the questions for this report, I wanted to get a sense of where the initial request was, if you have information about that now.
Thank you. And through the chair, my understanding through Michelle's office is that they're still working on that particular request.
Okay. So I'll move on to other questions, and I'll come back to that. So what is the current standard for each CSW in terms of the number of schools that they're supposed to cover? So how many schools does each CSW staff person have to cover right now?
Associate Director Zucker or Salmon?
Through the chair, the number actually varies, and that's part of the challenge. It depends on, the number actually varies somewhere between 6 and 10 at this point in time, depending on the community, depending on the level of staffing, depending on some challenges with respect to staff that may be on leave. So that's why the number varies a little bit.
Perfect. Then you actually jumped to my next question, which is, in practice, what happens? But the number is the budgeted number is 6.5, 6.25, but then in practice, the number changes because we have some shortages, some folks that have gone on leaves and things of that nature. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. And the motion here, the report looks to start to deal with that issue. So I'm curious as to how that report that we asked for last year and items B, C, and D here would be meshed. Are we looking at having two reports? Are we maybe looking at possibly having one report that looks at all of these items?
Through the chair, outside of item C, which speaks to a report with respect to the feasibility of the school improvement plan, the reports, there would be a great deal of overlap and alignment on them.
Okay, and again, not to put you on the spot, but what would be a realistic timeline? And this was my question from last year, okay? So what would be a realistic timeline for us to bring back a report from staff that speaks to the same issue that we have in front of us?
And through the chair, I'm reluctant to provide a timeline right now in the absence of Ms. Monroe being able to provide us with further guidance.
Okay, so then that's a challenge because we would like to have a report back, but it has to have a timeline. Otherwise, I'm not sure we're doing service to the folks that take part in the committee and have looked at this. So I think we need to have some time of working timeline that we bring back our report from staff because it's been obviously some time that this issue has been top of mind for them.
So through the chair, we can provide that particular information certainly in Trustee Weekly on Friday, if that's all right.
I think that the committee itself would need to have a response as well. So what would be the mechanism by which we can get back to the committee and inform them of a timeline in a way that's fair to the real life pressures that staff have and advocacy that the group and the committee as a whole has taken upon themselves? Like, what would be the mechanism by which we can get back to them?
Through the chair, I think we'd be happy to provide an actual update at their next committee meeting.
Okay, and to my colleagues and the FPAC committee, my last question to you would be, to you as a whole, would be whether or not maybe having two reports and that break up the financial element from some of the other elements would make sense or not. But I would like to move this, if anybody wants to move it as it is, with a recommendation to report to the budget process and to report back to the committee as well. I think we need to do those two items.
So what is your ask?
So because we need to move a motion, I'm looking at Trustee Laskin. She asked some question about how she would like to move this. If she would like to, after my time is up in the next 50 seconds, if she would like to move a motion, I think it would be good for us to also have the sort of full report outside of the budget process that deals with some of the other items that aren't directly tied into the budget process.
Thank you, Vice Chair Didapedes. Trustee Laskin. So can we see your motion? Is just item A, or are you moving the whole?
Mr. Chair, clarification. I thought only item A is before FBEC. The other items are not the purview of this committee. And I would think that the detail that's in A would be part of the report that would come back on March 19th. Okay. The other report that is being asked for, I don't think is before us tonight.
So if I can ask, was only item A referred to us?
Correct. Item A referred to FBEC on March 4th. That's it.
Got it. Missed that. Thank you. Okay, so that's just the motion. Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Didapedes and Trustee Laskin.
Can I just clarify? The other pieces of the motion, I think, are still part of the responsibility of PSSC.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Trustee Laskin's motion. She's referring item A.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move item A with similar language that I moved the last report be referred to staff for inclusion to come back to us in the March 19th report.
Do we have a seconder? Trustee McLean? Do we have anybody on speaker's list? No.
Sorry, Chair, my hand's up.
Her hand is up, she said, I think.
Is it up? Is it working?
You could.
Trustee Arts?
Yes,
Just for clarification, do you have question on the motion?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I think my question would have been
Trustee
relevant
Arts?
before or after. Sorry, is the motion on the floor?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay.
thought it was just moved and seconded.
This is saying no. Trustee Arts, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. I just have one concern is that is whether or not a specific number of 4 is too prescriptive. So I would, I doesn't necessarily need an amendment, but I'm hoping that staff will, this gives staff the flexibility to come back with numbers as to whether we can increase the CSW allocation, and if 4 doesn't work, that they would also come back with other suggestions that could work. That it's not so prescriptive that if it's like 4 or nothing.
Trustee Arts, it's just a comment, or do you have a question?
I have a question. Is the number of reducing the number of schools to 4 too prescriptive for staff to work with? Or can they come back? Can they work with this and come back on with a report on how CSWs could be increased to lower the number of schools that they serve?
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you for the question. I think that we can calculate based on 4 per school, just like the 6.25 per school is being used as the current number. And I would say that the allocation there would be an operational component to the actual allocation if it were to be approved, and it may not be necessarily allocated on one to cover 4 schools.
Okay, so I just want to understand that it's not going to die in the process if exactly 4 doesn't work.
Through the chair, I believe that we can work with the numbers that are in the motion to bring back a budget amount.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Do you want to speak? You good? Is the motion ready? Denise? We ready? Yes, thank you. We are voting on e-scribe, and the vote is ready. Trustees, please vote. The committee members.
Trustee Lee is in favor.
It's not coming up on eScribe for me. I'm in favor.
Trustee Lee and Vice Chair Chan.
Chair voted in favor.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chan. Trustee Lee.
That was Trustee Lee. I voted in favor. That was I voted twice.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. And the motion is carried. Thank you. Before we move on to item number 6, can we have a roll call, Denise? And trustees who have joined after the vote. Good, thank you. Trustee Nunziata and Trustee Pay, are you online?
Through the chair, yes. Oh, where am I?
Thank you.
Here I am.
Trustee Pay? All right, we'll move along.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, so sorry.
Thank you, Trustee Pay. Item
Thank you.
6.1, staff-based allocation 2024-25. And who's speaking to this?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm going to turn this report over to Executive Officer Melissa Kennedy from People and Culture. But before I do, I just want to recognize the efforts of People and Culture and of the budget team to prepare and bring this forward. And to, not to steal any of your thunder, Melissa, but just to say that there are no budget reductions that are part of this report coming forward tonight. Any reduction would be enrollment based only. There are no budget decisions that have been made through this process to reduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Director Zucker. Executive Officer Melissa, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, the school-based staff allocation report for 2024-25 is presented tonight for approval at board on March 6th in order for schools to receive their school staffing allocations after March break. This will allow them time to prepare their school organizations and timetables to meet collective agreement staffing timelines. Staff have prepared these allocations based on the enrollment projections provided by the planning department to ensure that sufficient staff are available to meet all class size regulations and collective agreement parameters. Due to the nature of projections being done 6 months prior to the start of the school year, staff will hold back some staff allocation to first ensure that projections are met in the fall and allow for any adjustments required. These holdbacks include approximately 3% of designated early childhood educators, 1.5% of elementary teachers, and 2% of secondary teachers. School-based staffing accounts for approximately 65% of the board's budget. Executive Officer Craig Snyder and Manager Lori Moore will take you through the allocation and outlining relevant information. Following the presentation, staff are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Executive Officer Melissa. The speaker's list.
Thank you, Executive Officer Kennedy. If I could just get share screen access and I'll share a PowerPoint we have prepared. Thank you.
PowerPoint, that would be great.
It's coming. Are we putting PowerPoint online?
Yes.
Yep.
So tonight, as Executive Officer Kennedy said, we are going to speak to the board approving the budget in March so that school principals can receive their staffing at the first week after the March break on the week of March 18th. This will allow our principals times to staff their schools, creating timetables and working with their school-based staffing committees and getting approval through their superintendent and meeting our collective agreement timelines. Some context for tonight's discussion: school-based staffing allocation takes into account the legislative requirements, including class size regulation, collective agreement provisions, and stays within our available resources as a board. There are two primary funding sources for the allocation. Of course, the first is the grant for student needs and the various components of the grants that support school-based staffing. And the second is the priorities and planning funding. And for 24-25, staff have assumed the 3 grants outlined on the screen will continue. And should they not continue in the announcement from the province, we'd have to adjust staffing accordingly. And that's supported around reading intervention grant, the math recovery plan for school math facilitators, and the support for de-streaming and transitions to high school, of which some of the staff are in tonight's report. As Executive Officer Kennedy said, we do have a holdback that we provide every year at this time of year as part of the overall allocation. It's included in the allocations you'll see tonight. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, our planning department is forecasting enrollment 6 months ahead of when the students actually show up in September. And so the holdback provides a buffer against us not hitting our system projections or individual schools not hitting their projections. However, if we do hit the projected enrollments that planning has, all the holdback will be released, of course, as needed to support class sizes and programs. And as the Executive Officer Kennedy said a moment ago, for designated childhood educators, that's approximately 3%. For elementary teachers, it's 1.5% of the allocation, and for secondary teachers, it's 2%. Tonight, we'll only be speaking to the traditional approaches to allocating staff based on available funding. We do realize that trustees have raised some concerns about additional staffing in such areas as vice principals and other areas, but those will be brought through as consideration at the March 19th special FBAC as part of the options to balance report. So you'll not see those numbers in tonight's presentation. This is a summary page from the report that shows you that tonight you're authorizing and a board approving on Wednesday $2.3 billion of the board's operating budget, which represents about 65% of our overall allocation. I would like to take you now through the individual pages and provide some additional comments for your consideration. So elementary teachers, you'll see overall we have an increase in elementary teachers. And I'll take you first to the early reading intervention note. And you'll see in the current year it shows 0, and in 24-25 we're saying 42. That's because at the time of the March staffing report last year, the PPF hadn't been announced. Those teachers are in place this year in schools, and it is 42 this year. So it's a continuation of the grant, assuming the grant continues. Next, I'd like to take you to the ESL enrollments, and I'd like to speak to the 305 that was in this year's plan. Due to the influx of newcomers in year, that actually went up to 335 students. And based on the projections from our planning department, we anticipate we'll need another 100 teachers for the newcomers coming to the city next year. And then lastly, I'd like to speak about the overall classroom prep time. And as we believe staffing allocations are within the increase for newcomers within the ESL grant, and we have looked at our historical trends for class sizes across the district, we feel that the modest reduction in the classroom teachers with the increase in ESL, that we will be able to meet all class size obligations coming forward next year. In profile teachers, there's only one small increase for Health and Safety Committee, and that's just to meet our obligations under health and safety. In secondary teachers, I'd like to point you to a couple things in this report. The first is on e-learning, the last line on this chart on the screen right now. And e-learning is where the ministry expects students to take 2 e-credits before they get their secondary diploma. As we're experiencing, that is not happening in our schools, and students have the option to opt out of e-learning. So the 92 that was planned for this year in the staff report have been reduced to 35, but those additional teachers have been put in the classroom line as they will serve the students that are attending in person. The next slide I'd like to take you through is to ESL, and again, similar to elementary, we are seeing an increase in ESL teachers because of newcomers to Canada based on our planning projections. The next place I'll take you is the classroom line, and here again, you're seeing an increase both in enrollment, but also because we're moving those e-learning teachers up to the e-learning line to ensure we make our class sizes for the students that show up for in-person learning. And then lastly, I'll take you to the profile page, which will come on shortly to show you the small decrease there. So you'll see a small decrease in alternative school supplement, and this is not a decrease in program. The programs remain at the same level and the viability, but the enrollment has increased slightly in our alternative schools, thereby requiring less of a supplement to maintain the program at its current levels. And that's why you see the slight decline in alternative school supplement. You'll also see here small changes, and again, health and safety on the next page has been increased by 1 as well. The next place I'd like to take you is designated early childhood educators. And this number has come down slightly this year because we are anticipating a small decline in enrollment in our SK and JK classes. And so it attributes the reduction in the FTEs for DECEs because of the decreased enrollment in the JKSK panel. Next is the vice principals. And again, these are based on our funding levels. And again, during year, the board added 20 elementary VPs and 8 secondary VPs after this staffing report. And again, those will be considered March 19th as part of the options to balance report coming forward. And there's been a small increase of 0.5 elementary VP for Kabakanoshui, the Wandering Spirit School. In our educational assistants non-special ed, these are ones that do alternatives, attendance and caring, safe and caring program, and these remain at 9 year over year. Our special ed support staff, again, has gone up a little bit, and this has been in discussions with our special education department and Associate Director Lisco. So we have it, and we're basing on needs of our students. The other thing that's important in the report itself, you'll notice we put both in the elementary teacher, the secondary teacher, and a special education support staff, that the special education department will move staffing around to fit the needs of the student. So the numbers do flux between support and teachers for that reason each year from what is approved in March. School-based office clerical is maintaining at the same level based on funding. There is not a significant change in funding with the number of students across the district of 582 schools. In school-based safety monitors, the number is being kept constant at 143.5, and this is to acknowledge the additional 40 SBSMs that were added during the pandemic, will continue to ensure students have access to a caring adult to support mental health and well-being. So it has not been reduced to its pre-pandemic levels. In lunchroom supervisions, you can see we're holding status quo, although we're expecting a small decline in the full-day kindergarten enrollments. We will offset any of the lunchroom supervisors into the regular grades 1 to 8 as needed and appropriate. Our aquatic instructors, at the board report last year, it was moved at 80, and then subsequently after the March report, there was 6 added by the board. So we are maintaining those 86 aquatic instructors for the 24-25 school year. Similarly for food program assistants, we're maintaining at the 37 we had this year going into next year. Lastly, we have our caretaking allocation, which is primarily based on square footage used within our operating buildings, and it also includes our non-school sites and is staying at the level of last year of 2,098. So as far as next step, this report, if approved by the Finance Budget Enrollment Committee, goes to the March 6th board for approval, and that will allow time for our People and Culture Department to prepare school-by-school allocations during the March break. They will meet with our principals in the week following, in March 18th, to provide the school allocations to our principals. Our principals will start to prepare their class organizations and timetables to be reviewed with their school staffing committees. And then finally, the principals seek approval from their superintendent on the organizations that they set up for September. And through you, Mr. Chair, myself and Lori are here and happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Executive Officer Snyder. And we have a speakers list on the item. Trustee Laskin, first to go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I got very excited at Associate Director Zucker's introduction when she said there were no cuts reflected between this year and next year. But then again, when you read the small print, the additional staff we added in last year are not included in this allocation. So I think a number of us are awaiting with bated breath the options that will come before us on March 19th. But my actual question is, so I see the holistic numbers. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, some of us have had concerns over the years about how they are actually distributed, how the whole numbers that we approve as a board then get operationalized and implemented and distributed to schools. So through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I'm going to ask, is there any consideration of the formulaic approaches, and will that be coming to the board? For example, we did have a formulaic approach for VPs. We had a formulaic approach for school office, etc. And I am just wondering about how the actual operational implementation of these large numbers can come before us so that we can, it will help us explain to our communities why X school might have this and Y school might have that in terms of, because it's more than just in school enrollments. We've learned that through the years. So I'm just wondering when the staffing goes to the schools on March 18th, what will come to trustees to help us explain to our communities? Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Associate Director Zucker is speaking on this.
Thank you, and through the chair, we can take that away. As the trustee indicated, there are many factors that go into the allocation of staffing, and so it is possible to at least outline the factors that are being considered as part of the allocation. But I would look to my academic colleagues to provide any additional information, or people and culture.
Thank you, Associate Director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can help and Lori can add in. So a lot of the formulas are formulaic. There are some local decision-making that our superintendents make with some of the allocations to support the schools that they feel have the greatest need. But that once this is approved, that's the staff undertaking to make sure the staff are allocated appropriately and equitably across the system to meet the needs of the schools. Lori, do you have anything you want to add?
I think I'll just include that the formula is a starting point, but it is not the end result because of the local decision making that's involved in almost all of the allocations other than classroom. And so that rolls through the executive superintendents.
Then through you, Mr. Chair, again to staff. So this rolls out March 18th. We're meeting on March 19th. Can you just confirm for me, March 19th is additional information, but we actually are not voting anything on March 19th. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, can you remind me of the date when we're actually voting?
Thank you, and through the chair, the operating budget will come to FBEC on March 27th, and then it will go to special board on April 2nd.
Okay, so a request, I'm making a request just from me, but I'm sure my other colleagues may share this concern. So when it rolls out to schools, it will take a few days for it to trickle down. Schools will have their staffing committee. Superintendents will all get in a room and play the Hunger Games about vying for the additional staff. I guess my ask is we will have to understand staffing in our schools pretty well. We won't understand by March 19th. So the conversation about the holistic numbers, maybe of additional VPs that can we add back, additional community support workers we can add back, additional safety-based staff we can add back, et cetera, still won't be real to us. They'll still be very large numbers. So between the 19th and the vote on the 27th, we're going to need some clarity. At least I'm going to need some clarity. I'll only speak for myself. I'm going to need some clarity in what that rollout actually looks like and conversations with superintendents in terms of concerns, legitimate concerns they may have with the way staffing has rolled out. And there may be a few schools that may need to be addressed. So I might be looking on the 19th to add some flexibility into the numbers, even though I don't really understand what those numbers are. And I seek some direction from staff on how we actually can do that so that when we vote on the budget, we're held accountable to our constituents in ways that we simply don't know by these big numbers. We don't know how these play out. But at some point, we'll know how the rollout is gone, what the local flexibility is, and the gap that we might need to go into the mix of everything that we need to add back. through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Madam Director, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, there is a mechanism that has been used previously, which is a learning center conversation with the trustees, superintendents, and learning center executive to review what staffing looks like and where there may be pressures or significant differences based on changes in enrollment or the ways in which the allocation has been used this year versus the 23-24 school year. So that would be my suggestion for how to address the questions and concerns that have been brought forward.
Then through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Madam Director, for that. That gives me confidence. I am wondering through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, if those meetings can please be set up for trustee calendars so we don't lose that opportunity and we can schedule them in. So that when we come here, first of all, on March 26th to hear deputants, and then on March 27th to make decisions, we'll have that information. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Trustee Arhat, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I'm going to echo a little bit what Trustee Laskin has had to say here around this not being an allocation without cuts. So growth of student population without growth of staff is still a cut. It's also, we went through a very difficult round of cuts that I did not support last year. And the schools in my community that have experienced those cuts, like in particular where there was a loss of more than 5.0 staff, we are feeling that. And so this is something that to go another year at those staffing levels would be very serious, right? They are very low staffing levels. I'm going to speak very specifically to vice principals because I think it's important. My read of this is that almost 10% of vice principals are going to get told before going into March break that their job is no longer guaranteed. Should trustees vote on this? And I have to say, I feel that I don't support that. The floor was too low last year, even when we added back in. Trustees will recall that I sought to advance a motion to add even more vice principals last year. I do not believe the number of vice principals that are in our schools this year is acceptable. And what we would be approving as trustees with this would be to reduce that roughly 10% of schools if they go 0.5 allocations, my understanding. I don't know if we can go back to that. So it's 20 elementary vice principals and 8 secondary vice principals, so 20.0, 8.0. So that's up to 56 schools that could be told that they would be losing a 0.5 VP. In the ward I represent, one of the schools that would be slated for the loss of that 0.5 VP has an alternative school program, an extended J program. They're in a high needs area. I cannot see how this is going to go down. And so I want to plead with my trustee colleagues that we can't accept this low of a floor for vice principals in particular. Our system is not structured that way. And so I would like to strongly advocate, I don't sit on this committee, but to strongly advocate that we don't even wait until March 19th, that we show our vice principals going into March break that we aren't going to accept this significant level of loss in our system. And thank you for that consideration. I also want to ask about ECE. I want to ask a question now about ECEs. In the ward I represent, we're experiencing increases in kindergarten and many schools, and there's a feeling that the allocation of ECEs is insufficient for JK and SK classrooms. I'm wondering if staff could speak to how we set those levels, how they're determined, what we're guided by, and why couldn't we add more? Why would we need to cut system? Why couldn't we keep the ECE levels and better support those JK and SK classrooms? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Arhat. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, so I can start and then I will turn it over to my colleagues. We do calculate the number of ECEs required based on the projected enrollment for kindergarten and based on the requirements of the ministry to have an ECE in a classroom that has over 16 children. So just based on the number of kindergarten classes that are expected, and because there is a decrease in kindergarten enrollment, there would naturally be a decrease in the number of ECEs required.
Okay, thank you. And that's because of ratios set by the province. So we would need more funding because we're in a deficit to be able to go over and above.
Thank you, and through the chair, that's correct. And we will have a DECE in every classroom that has an enrollment over 16 per the requirements. So there would be very few classrooms that would not have a DECE. So additional DECEs would not provide additional support necessarily. Like there wouldn't be any additional classrooms to add them to.
Okay, thank you very much. I could ask more questions about this, but I didn't give people heads up, and I don't know if we know the numbers. I would be very interested to know how many young people we have in JK and SK class. From what I'm hearing in schools in my ward, there are a number of people who are on the province's new autism support program that are getting no supports. They would qualify for thousands of dollars, but that they are not receiving because they're in queue, and that those students are coming into our schools without those supports. So it's effectively being downloaded onto our system to manage, while the Ontario Autism program, while they wait on that list. And I don't know if staff would have any comments or any further information they could provide with respect to that.
Trustee Arhat, I think we are missing some of the comments you made because the reception is not that great coming from your side. So can you repeat if you don't mind?
My sincere apologies, Chair. Thank you for your patience with me. I was asking if staff had any comment or context. What I'm seeing in the ward I represent is that students, particularly in the JK and SK years, are waiting for supports through the Ontario Autism Support Program. They're not receiving funding for outside of school supports through that program. And so that's thousands of dollars of support programming that is not being used by these students. And these students are in our system, effectively downloading that need onto our system. And I'm wondering if staff had any comments or observations to offer on that. That's what I'm seeing in my ward.
Thank you, Trustee Arhat. Madam Director, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the chair. Certainly anecdotally, that is what we are hearing as senior staff from principals and educators in classrooms. I would want to verify that information directly, and we can provide the information to trustees in the next weekly update.
Okay, thank you very much. That would be appreciated. I would be particularly interested in the 4 to 6 age category, as I understand that that's also a crucial window for those supports to be offered, and that there are thousands of young people, children on that wait list. Thank you very much.
Thank
If
you,
I
Trustee.
may, through you, Chair, it's Associate Director Sarisco. I can speak to Trustee Earhart's question if it suits.
Go ahead, Associate Director.
Thank you very kindly. Trustee Earhart, I think that you, and just please verify for me, I am interpreting this correctly. I think that you're referring to the Ontario Autism Program funded by the Ministry of Child and Community Support Services. Am I correct?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you. That's correct. That was the program I was referring to, where families are on wait lists and could qualify for thousands of dollars of funds that would support those children who also happen to be in our system.
Thank you very much for the verification. So indeed, the wait list for the OAP is very extensive, as you have reported. The Ministry of Education and our board still have a very important duty, and we fulfill that duty when a child has a diagnosis of autism and is indicated through the IPRC process and the school team meeting. We would be supporting that student in class as we do all other students who have exceptionalities and disabilities. But I don't want to be in any way taking away from the point that you are making is when those students get off the wait list and receive their funding for the OAP, that we would partner very strongly with community agencies. But that support from community agencies is not the Ministry of Education funded. So please know that we continue to support students who are on the wait list for the OAP. Thank you. I hope that is reassuring.
Thanks. No, that's very helpful and appreciated. And just for the benefit of other trustees here, just that the challenges with that program, what I'm hearing in my community affect in particular the JK and SK cohorts in particular, which is why hearing a broad-based decrease in those classes for those with a diagnosis that are in a regular classroom, it may be hard for people to hear of that proposal as we're seeing the needs have never been greater in those particular classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart and Associate Director Sarisco. We have Trustee Arts.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I would echo Trustee Earhart's concerns in our schools, both for vice principals and for what I'm hearing in terms of our very young children in our system who are coming with greater needs than before, and needs for support, who may not have attended because of the pandemic, may not have attended programming. And not just from our system, but across the province, when I talk to trustees, the switch that the province made to giving parents money to fund services as opposed to funding services means that parents have lost access to services. And so, and in some communities, the services have folded because without base funding, they've not been able to maintain their operations. And I know that the wait lists have ballooned, and that trickles into our schools. And I know that we do have an assessment and we support them once they're here, but in many cases, these students need also access to outside support. So I don't know how it's a different ministry that funds this, which is unfortunate. I don't know how we make them talk. What the failing on the part of one ministry trickles into our system, and burdens our system in a way that then is not being funded within our system through the Ministry of Education. My question is the funding for Mr. Snyder mentioned the funding for literacy and math, so the different PPFs that the government has provided. I understand there's very good things embedded in the new literacy curriculum, and there's funding tied to the implementation of that curriculum. Do we know, or how confident are we that that's going to continue? And I ask because we had a literacy approach, we had funding in a PPF, and the ministry withdrew that PPF and then brought in a new one. So essentially, it wasn't really a funding change, it was just a shift in what the funding was called. But that changeover created chaos in some of our schools, because those central support staff, those staff that were hired or that were employed to deliver literacy, were surplused when the first grant ended, and then the new grant took its place, and we essentially hired them all back, but they weren't the same people. And so what I heard from my communities was the large numbers of staff that had these central support roles, literacy coaching, literary consultants, the myriad of central support roles for implementing literacy, that then had to return to their home schools, bumped staff that were in the home schools, and then some of them went, and then new people took literacy jobs and came out of schools, or they came back to the literacy jobs, and it created a lot of bumping of staff and a lot of instability that I would not like to see repeated. So how reasonably sure are we that this PPFs for the new curricula, the new math and literacy curricula, will continue into this year? Have we had any reassurances from the ministry? And in the event that it shifts in some format, are we able to create more stability for our schools in those shifting of staff, which I assume that if they're going to make a change in their approach, it'll be a namesake change that they can toot their own horn with, and not actual funding change. And I would hate to see those kinds of changes, which I know they do regularly, then impacting our schools.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, I think the scenario that you're referring to, Trustee Arts, is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So we are making the assumption that the grant will continue, either in its exact current form or, as indicated, possibly a change, but supporting similar priorities. In order for us not to go through the process that you just described, because if we weren't to make that assumption, then today you would have seen a decrease in those positions, and then as soon as the PPF was announced, we would have to go through that hiring process as you indicated. So we are taking I'm going to say, conservative risk that the PPF in some form will continue, so that those staff will continue to be supported, and we will not have to create that level of instability within the system.
Thank you, Associate Director. Trustee Arts.
Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you. Vice Chair Tidavidis, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to start with a question that on something that I saw on the presentation for the public town halls. It said that the benchmarks for 2024-25 are the same as for the prior year. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. That is our assumption right now. And if there will be increases in salaries and in wages, then we are expecting a similarly corresponding increase in revenue. So that's what you're seeing, is just to be consistent. We are assuming no changes.
And for staffing purposes, does that affect, say, the total number of elementary teachers or high school teachers?
Thank you, and through the chair, it does not, because the benchmarks are the amount of funding that we receive per enrollment, but the number of teachers that we have are based on the class size regulations. And so the benchmark would only really impact the salary level and not the numbers that we would have.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, in relation to the report in front of us, so the benchmarks wouldn't necessarily affect some of this, but in sort of some of the questions from some of the previous trustees, there's a concern, right? Adjusted to inflation and adjusted to our enrollment, how do some of these numbers stack up? And while the elementary and high school portion are regulated or mandated through statutory requirements, some other positions are not. So would it be true to say that some of the positions on this list, on the different appendixes, are actually reduced once you look at inflationary pressures and enrollment pressures?
So thank you. And through the chair, so enrollment is, as indicated, expected to increase across the board. And so those positions that are truly dependent on enrollment have increased accordingly. In some cases, enrollment does provide additional funding for positions. But that being said, and I'll use the example of the lunchroom supervisors, we've kept the same number of lunchroom supervisors as prior year. But the allocation of lunchroom supervisors changes as you move from kindergarten to 1 to 8, and therefore with less kindergarten and more 1 to 8, you will see approximately a similar allocation. And in other cases, like caretaking, for example, although enrollment is increasing, the square footage attached to the enrollment has not changed. So we have looked at how the enrollment does impact certain positions. And then we've also looked at the program that is being offered in the case of aquatic instructors, food program assistants. And when that's not changing, even though enrollment is increasing slightly, we have not made adjustments accordingly. But to the trustee's point, if you look at it just purely based on enrollment increase versus the increase in staffing, they would not be proportionate necessarily.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to move on into some questions specific to different appendixes. So I'll try and be clear. So I tried this last year and I was jumping all over the place. So I'm hoping I'm clear in my questions. So Appendix B, special education. More general question, but to some of the other trustees, to echo what some of them were concerned with, is the current level of funding sufficient for the demand that we have? Because like many of my colleagues, I get lots of calls from parents saying that they have a really difficult time accessing services. And ultimately, this feels like it's an issue of resourcing and the bottleneck of being able to process the requests that we get. So do we have sufficient funding for the demand? I know we're not funded to what we spend, but do we have enough allocated funding to the demand? Could we use more?
Thank you, and I will ask if Associate Director Sarisco is online, if she would like to offer any comments.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair to Trustee De DeVitis. Our allocation of staffing has grown proportionally to the increased enrollment, Trustee De DeVitis. And as I had shared earlier, it's difficult for us to say staffing equals better outcomes for students. There are so many variables. I am assured that the staffing allocation that is before you is similar to the allocation that we have for this year. We spend approximately $290 million over the special education envelope, and we should be spending over the envelope. It is a supplemental. It is a supplemental grant. I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that certainly additional funding
and increased investment from the ministry would help. Absolutely. But I am confident that the funding level for this year is equal to our funding level for next year is equal to this year. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As a follow-up question, moving on to Appendix D, principals and vice principals. Last year, after some long debates, we added a number of resources to the principal and vice principal budget. Not on the first meeting, but later. Why was that not the base for this report? Why was the sort of original sort of staff report the base for this current report?
So through the chair, as we discussed on January 19th when we brought forward the updated financial position, we did not include them because they were funded and indicated through the motion last year with one-time funding. And so we had not included, they are not included here today because the motion asking us to look at the level of support and possible additions is going to be addressed on the March 19th board meeting. So that's why today you're seeing the same level as previous, which is the reasoning that was provided on the 29th of January.
Thank you. Because I think there's some concern with that, and you know, I understand the concern and I share it. Because as we go forward for the next 3 weeks, we're going to have a conversation about those numbers, and we are leaving a number of folks in the lurch for the next couple of weeks if we don't make a change. Then there may be permanent changes. Regardless, I'll go to another question. Appendix H and I, school safety monitors and lunchroom supervisors. Did we spend the full allocation of funding last year to this to these two type of positions? Because I've seemed to remember that we had a really difficult time with hiring and retaining folks because of the nature of the work.
Through the chair, and I will turn to my people and culture colleagues if they have additional information. My understanding is that there are, and throughout the year at different times, different levels of vacancies within those positions.
Through the chair, I'll try to help out. They are, especially with our lunchroom supervisors, there is several positions unfilled throughout the year. We endeavor to fill the positions to our allocation, both for school-based safety monitors and lunchroom supervisors, and continue hiring throughout the year as people leave us to ensure that we are as close to complement as approved by the board as possible.
Thank you for the answer. And I brought up the question through the chair because I continue to receive feedback from schools about the difficulty of being able to, again, retain some of these folks. And that goes back to, you know, salary scales and a number of other factors we've discussed in other times. So I just want to bring this up as an issue because I feel that these are really important positions that do significant good to the schools that they're in, but that we're not necessarily following through in execution to be able to deliver the budgeted amount. And in this case, that is my concern. So I just want to leave that with staff as feedback. Now, I see that my time's almost up, so I was hoping I can go back on the list because I have a couple more questions if possible.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davidis. Trustee Laskin, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to talk about VPs for a minute. Because it is true. Last year they were reduced, but they weren't reduced in 2021, 2022, and they weren't reduced in 2022, 2023. They were reduced last year, which is why we added them back. So in actual fact, I guess my concern is to the points that have been raised. Yes, I do believe there will be consensus and support for adding back VPs on March 19th. I guess the question I'm asking staff is, what is the system communication then going to be as staffing rolls out on March 18th? And the very next day, there probably will be a willingness on this board to bring back the VP allocation, because I was just checking the minutes. 21-22, 190.5 FTEs for elementary. 22-23, 190.5 FTEs. They were stable. And then they were reduced last year, and then we added them back. And now for some reason, they're reduced again. And I guess I understand staff's obligation to base staffing on legislative requirements, but I don't understand the human side of this to get folks concerned about their job one day and then the next day finding out that no, we're actually adding them back. So I guess through you, Mr. Chair, I'm asking staff, what would the purpose be to not add VPs back today when in fact it could be the will of the committee to add them back on March 19th, and I know it all has to go to board. But I guess I'm asking you, what are we saying to our VPs? Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm not going to speak to the process piece. I will speak to the number piece and the reason that is going to the 19th. And the main reason is that, again, when we didn't include them, we have a deficit of 35 million, possibly more if we don't get proceeds of disposition. When we add them back, it does add to that budget, and staff believes it's important to look at the entire proposals for reduction compared to the addition. And so we know that we have to have a balanced budget, and we know that in order to do that, we're going to have to make reductions. And that obviously, as we increase, we have to make further reductions. So it really is to be able to look at the budget holistically, to say we're adding here, and this is where we're going to have, we're making a conscious decision to take away here in order to support that. I can turn to my academic or people and culture colleagues to speak about process and what would be communicated on the 19th.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can help. And we also do have attrition every year in our VP pool, so I'm not sure if we will be looking at sending VPs back to the teaching positions, but that'll be some of the work that our people in culture department will do as the approvals come through from board.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I don't actually.
Just one other point, I was pointing out to my colleague here that also VPs get promoted to principals. So the pool of VPs should not be overall adversely affected by this change at this point in time.
Okay, with respect, just like the other staff that get moved around, VPs also get moved around. And I'm not really understanding why they were cut last year. Every year we have problems with deficit budgets. In fact, the deficit in the year 22-23 was even bigger than last year's deficit, and yet we kept the elementary VPs at 190.5. So they were at 190.5 FTEs in 21-22, 190.5 in 22-23, and then all of a sudden in 23-24, they dropped to 164.5, and then I'm just talking elementary right now, and then we added back 20. So I mean, I think it is late in the game. We know the track we're on, But again, I ask, what is the communication to VPs or TSAA clearly to understand that this is the number? Because your staffing is going to roll out. Some of my schools, you're not going to get VPs. People are in those jobs now. They won't see themselves reflected on March 18th. What is the messaging then going? And I'm thinking about the people and culture side of our organization in terms of how we're treating our staff. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Director.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, I apologize in advance. I missed part of the earlier conversation. In thinking about our principals and vice principals, particularly the VP allocation and the total allocation that is in this report, we do not, as Executive Officer Snyder suggested, anticipate a reduction in the actual individuals in these roles because of anticipated retirements, the vacancies that are known. We anticipate that those individuals will be placed. So while they might not be in their current location, every effort would be made to try and keep consistency where it makes sense, but we do not actually expect attrition of the vice principals.
Thank you, Madam Director. I understand that from the factual point of view, but that makes no sense to communities. Through you, Mr. Chair. They will know their VP position is gone. So whether the person in the VP position at that particular school doesn't lose their job because they end up somewhere else, the school community will feel the loss of that VP. That will reverberate down. We will be getting all the emails and the phone calls and the concerns. And again, respectfully, I'll only speak for myself. I believe there will be intent on this board to add positions back. What that magic number is, I don't know, but I know we will be adding back. So I guess through you, Mr. Chair, if it makes sense that a VP in a particular school who loses that allocation of a VP doesn't get moved or changed automatically, I'm running out of time, but I just want an opportunity that there can be at least some stability if in fact we are adding back positions. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Thank you, Trustee Lassing. Madam Director.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I understand fully the question now. Staff can certainly take back and look at how we create conditions for stability until a final decision has been made by the board. We will make every effort to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please put me back on the list.
Thank you. Vice Chair Diabetes, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to questions around Appendix J, aquatics. So we're adding some positions. We're adding 6 positions to this, correct?
No, that's correct.
It's for staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. I'm just trying to find the page myself. No, the report last year that came to the Finance Budget Enrollment Committee went onto board was at 80. Subsequent, after the March report, additional 6 were added through board motion. So the actual complement this year is 86, and it's being maintained at 86. It's just a timing difference of when that second approval happened. We're trying to represent the numbers that were in the March report last year.
Okay. So in this case, we followed through with the numbers there. Fair enough. I mean, I guess this is a question about the conversation that we had when we did add the positions and how they reflect the access that communities in the northwest and northeast of the city of Toronto have access to aquatics, because this is an investment by the school board in terms of our priorities. And, always think about, yes, those 6 extra positions would have an impact on the kids that have an opportunity to go out and learn how to swim, and that could literally be life-saving. But, can we instead spend those 6 positions on special education? So I guess the question is whether there is a report forthcoming that talks about how it is that we try and create some equity around how some of the investment in this particular area is being spread. Like, how are we trying to account for the fact that the physical capital locations for some of these places of learning are not found in large parts of the city?
Thank you. And through the chair, I will ask Associate Director Salmon to speak to this question, please.
Thank you. And through the chair, we are bringing forward a report for April PSSC that will speak to a review of the pools, and it will speak to access in different locations across the city, where pools are located, the financing of pools, and some of the other aspects with respect to the allocation of pool staff, but also the number of pool staff that are actually that we've been able to get access to through the course of the year. So that report will be coming to trustees for April. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. And of course, I understand that some of the trustees feel very strongly about aquatics, but I think on a sort of move forward basis, past the point that we received that report, at least for me, what we see and what we get in that report will affect whether or not I can continue to support those levels of funding and how we make those spaces accessible. Wanted to move to Appendix K, very similar type of question. This is our pupil foundation grant and how it's tied to culinary arts. And I understand that we have a report forthcoming that speaks to our food programming and how we organize our resources around some of that. And I know that we haven't seen the report, so then my question is, how does the current level of funding affect that future report for the next year, if at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would refer that to, I believe, is Associate Director Cisco or Salmon, who have the food programs and can understand and explain them better.
So thank you, and through the chair, part of that particular report, and that report actually represents information that we were started looking at actually 2 to 3 years ago around food programs across our system and how we actually provide staffing to those particular programs. The report will endeavor to create a level of equity across our system with respect to food programs and how staff in those particular programs are allocated, especially in an era of limited resources. Thank you.
So if I can follow up with a question, if I understand the answer correctly through the chair, the report will begin to answer questions around whether or not our funding allocation is sufficient, but we need not worry about any of the recommendations that are coming in the report, because that we'll be at least be able to get started on some of this progress that we want to make. Is that fair to say?
Thank you. And through the chair, part of what the report actually speaks to is how do we maintain a level of service around food programming within our school sites. And it also does go speak to the need for redistribution of the allocation around different sites and how we do that in the most equitable way. We've met with all of the principals that have food schools to incorporate their thoughts into the particular process around this particular redistribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And okay, last question. Because we're running out of appendixes, actually. Appendix L. So every time I've talked to student councils at different schools, middle schools or high schools, it's not necessarily the most important thing to them, but they all mention cleanliness, particularly around bathrooms and things of that nature. So there's obviously an issue for students in terms of, at least in my word, in terms of how well we're taking care of our buildings. This is something that I've shared a couple times with senior staff. Is our current staffing level for caretaking sufficient?
So thank you, and through the chair, I will start with absenteeism and vacant positions are not only impacting our classrooms, they are also impacting many other areas of the board. So our caretaking absence rates are higher even than our teacher absence rates. And so the impact on cleanliness of the school is not necessarily a reflection of the number of positions that we have, but it is impacted by attendance and by possible vacancies.
And is that something that, through the chair, is that something that staff see as improving year to year from 22 to 23 and then on to 24? What kind of projection are we seeing in terms of the effectiveness or current funding level? And then I'm going to re-ask the question. So is it sufficient? Are projections sufficient to meet the standards that are needed to be met?
Thank you, and through the chair. So again, just to answer the question, 2,098 FTE we believe is sufficient to address the caretaking needs of the schools based on the square footage and based on our previous experience. And that would be if we had similar levels of attendance. We know, and I can turn to my people in culture colleagues, but that attendance or absenteeism has been increasing year over year, and caretaking is not an exception to that. So we would expect caretaking absences to increase if the trend continues.
As a matter of fact, as I understand that, through the chair, my last question, caretaking, I see some of the highest rates of absenteeism. Is that not correct?
Through the chair, so there are certainly high rates specific to the caretakers. We are having or taking the opportunity to do a holistic review of the high rate usage areas of the organization because we know there are tremendous savings to be realized by reducing unnecessary absences and promoting attendance and meaningful attendance at work. So certainly those are high on our list to address through attendance support.
Thank you. I have 2 seconds, so no more questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair Diabetes. Do we have anybody else online? Trustee Laskin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to go back to communications for a minute, and through you to the director or staff. So we'll be voting tonight. I'm wondering about the communications that will go to principals to share with their school communities in terms, I guess I'd like to see a couple of things communicated based upon a decision tonight. The first would be that this still has to be approved by the board. The second is that on March 19th, there may be additional staff opportunities to add back staff based upon conversations of the committee, which then would have to be approved by the board. The third would be that once the staffing rolls out, similar to what you said, Matt, through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Director, once the staff rolls out to schools, learning centers will meet trustees and superintendents to discuss what it means school by school. And there may be some opportunities through learning center additional allocation and or advocacy to add back when formulas don't actually meet community need. And then I guess because I guess why I'm asking is, we have deputations on March 26th. And I would just really like to de-escalate as opposed to ratchet up what those conversations what those conversations will be. And if we have information that talks about process and next steps and advocacy and how change can be made, I just think it helps us all in terms of the tone and tenor of deputations on the 26th. Not just for VPs, but for other staffing where people have advocated, like community support workers. And I smile thinking back to my years and where my kids were in elementary school in the former Toronto board, where my school had a community support worker that used to help us and as school councils, and it had nothing to do with model schools at the time. This was across the system. When boards had their own taxing ability, could put in the kinds of supports to engage communities. So through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I'm just asking about the communications plan in general to try to provide information that that lets people know it's not final till it's final. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the director, whoever she wishes to answer.
Staff, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, thank you for your feedback with regards to what we should be communicating to schools and communities following the decision made this evening and any subsequent decision made on Wednesday evening when the board considers this report. This is the point at which I should also say, to reiterate what Associate Director Zucker and Executive Officers Kennedy and Snyder have said this evening. This report appears to you tonight in this format with very little change because, in fact, we are trying to protect services directly to schools and students. The report that will follow will have significant reductions in order to achieve our 34 million or 50 million deficit. So I know the board will consider those reductions, but I did want to put it sort of a placeholder because this is our good news story. This is our story of stability for this budget season, and there are very difficult decisions coming forward that likely will yield a number of different staff, community members, and students who will want to provide you with advice about where reductions should or should not occur. So thank you for your feedback and consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, to the director, but I would qualify those remarks because VPs won't look at it that way. I don't think one can qualify this as no reductions except for VPs. And I think that's what makes it startling through you, Mr. Chair. So I think we have to watch how we position this. Because for every other category, it's exactly true, as you say, except for VPs. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I've probably hammered that point home enough.
That's it, Trustee Laskin. Thank you very much. Trustee Shan, you're next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Would staff be able to tell me what is the rough percentage increase in enrollment for elementary students that we're expecting next year?
Through the chair, if you give me a second, I will just confirm the number.
Okay, while we wait for that, there is a number of additional staff for reading related, I guess reading coaches or reading recovery related teaching. Is that a separate grant that is being utilized to hire those positions?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part. I guess I'll start answering and hopefully, Trustee Shan, if I didn't pick up the one part of your question, you can repeat it. But in the report, as we said earlier, the early reading intervention teachers were deployed after the March report last year when the PPF was released. So we are maintaining the 42 for both years. So there will be no, at this point, change in staffing on the recovery early intervention teachers. Did that answer your question, Trustee?
Yeah, and it's not supported through GS, and it's a separate part of the funding, right?
Yes, the 42 are funded through a PPF.
PPF, okay. And so I would like to know what the expected enrollment increase both for elementary panel as well as the secondary panel from our projection in terms of percentage. And while we see at the total there's an increase, the classroom teaching staff either same or little less from what I saw. Is that right?
Sorry, through the chair, we're trying to look up the numbers. So I apologize. You're asking if the numbers are the same more or less from previous year?
Yeah, for elementary teachers in terms of classroom teachers and elementary secondary teachers, I would like to get a sense of enrollment versus teaching staff. And I know it's not necessarily proportionate because obviously it's determined by classroom sizes, but I would like to know what the differences are, because I also saw there was a significant increase to ESL teachers, which is great. That also is projected on a significant increase to newcomer students. And I'm trying to figure out how that alone is helpful if you don't have additional teaching staff for classrooms.
So thank you. I will turn it to Executive Officer Snyder, but before we do, I think it's important for the elementary teachers in particular, for the past 2 years, we have been calculating the number of teachers based on formula, and then when the actual numbers have come in, based on where students are located, we actually hadn't been releasing the holdback in the same way that we had been previously. So the number of teachers that we actually have deployed are less than the number of the actual number of teachers for 23-24 are less than the number of teachers that were included in March last year, even though enrollment had increased slightly. So based on that experience, we have adjusted the number of elementary teachers in this year. So there is an actual fairly significant increase. I think it's over 100 from our actual numbers to next year, but it's not reflected here because the number that is a comparator for March 2023 was never actually fully utilized in the schools, if that helps.
And through you, Chair, I'll just, from our January 18th, the report that came to FBAC from our planning department, between this year and next year, we're seeing an increase of 323 elementary students with a decline in JKSK of 725 forecasted. And in elementary, we're looking at about 1,100 student increase. And to what Associate Director Zucker said, the way we do the calculation, we are adding significant number of ESL teachers in. We believe that we will come in at the class sizes to support both in the elementary and secondary panel, the class size arrangements. Because as you can understand, when you have 1,100 students in secondary, for example, increase, that's over 150 schools. So in the individual school, it may be a marginal increase if it was on average. But we are using the enrollments that planning forecast and the modeling that our people and cultures do, and we feel we have the sufficient teachers in this report to make class sizes across the district.
Thank you to the staff, through you, Mr. Chair. Going back to Trustee Didavidi's question around the aquatic staffing number, my understanding is that only that item reflects the later addition in the current proposal compared to all the other items. What is the rationale for just that item reflecting the addition? Is it because of the community delegations and the outcry against the cuts, or is there any other reason why that's reflected that way?
Didn't get the first bit.
So are you referring to aquatic instructors?
Yes, I am.
Through the chair, thank you. So through the chair, that one would reflect the increase, and because when we made the decision last year through the budget process, it was using the permanent addition of funds as opposed to using the carry forwards, for example, that we used to fund vice principals, which were one time, or adding those safety positions to reflect a period in time. So that would be the distinction that staff saw, is that the addition of aquatic instructors through the budget process last year was a permanent addition.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you, staff, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shan. So we do not have any more speakers on the list. So we'll be voting separately, Denise, correct? Because we have item A, there's a conflict, right? Yeah. Yeah, we need mover and seconder for the item. For part A. You moving? Yeah. Trustee McLean is moving, and Vice Chair Tidavidis will second it. Yeah.
Cherneslin in favor. It's not coming up on eScribe.
Vice Chair Shan, Trustee Lee.
Against. Against.
Yeah. Trustee Lee. Trustee Lee, how do you vote? Trustee Lee. Can mark him absent. And it carries. And for the rest of the appendix, we need mover and a seconder. For the rest of the appendix, we just need A, right?
We just did A, because I can't vote on A, so we're doing that. Oh.
We just need A, so we have to do the rest now. So we need a mover and seconder for that. Chair Cherneslin and Trustee Hassan.
Shan against.
Cherneslin in favor.
Okay, so Trustee McLean, on item 6.1, there is an appendix A.
Yeah.
Trustee Laskin has declared conflict of interest, so we voted separately on the first one.
Right.
This is the second item. B of the same 6.1.
B to L.
Oh, sorry. Okay, now I get it. Sorry. I need big pictures with arrows and.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Is Trustee Lee online? No? Okay. Anybody else missing? Yeah. Close the vote, please. Thank you. Item 6.2, financial facts, revenue and expenditure trending March 2024. Who's speaking on this? Associate Director.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll ask Executive Officer Snyder to speak on this, please.
Chair, I'd first of all like to thank the Budget Finance Department as well as various other departments that help put this comprehensive document together each year. In front of you tonight is the financial facts draft for 2024 for your approval, or to be received, I should say. It does represent 5 years of financial data, and in the report, it shows the years up to 2022-23 as actuals and the current revised budget for 23-24. On page 4 of the financial facts, we identify the funding gaps in the ministry benchmarks that TSB experiences, as well as we add an additional chart at the bottom of the page this year to provide the funding gaps as it relates to benefits that TDSB is currently experiencing. And while the TD long-term disability and the WSIB are costs that are somewhat controllable by the board, the costs all boards are experiencing have not been fully funded by the ministry. However, EI and CCP are completely unavoidable by the board and are mandated to be paid to all employees that are earnings with the board, and none of these costs have been offset with ministry funding. On the top of page 26, we had again summarized what's in financial facts so you can see the differences. And then throughout the document, we identify the operating costs of the major expenditures as well as the funding for the Ministry of Education. And we do provide a summary on the capital expenditures of the board. And through you, Mr. Chair, we're happy to take any questions about the financial facts for 2024.
Thank you, Executive Officer Snyder. We have Trustee Laskin on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This really is one of my favorite publications that we do in the TDSB. It is so full of data and information and tells the story. But I don't think we tend to speak to it enough, frankly. We don't. And I'm wondering through you, Mr. Chair, is obviously this, it's here for, right, it's just receipt. It has to go to board on March 6th. There are so many things on that March 6th agenda that should be highlighted for our public. This is definitely one of them. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm asking the executives to think about a way that expresses some of the information in here that is easily digestible for the public. For example, today on Twitter, X, I went back and forth with a few of the folks who write often for the Globe and the Toronto Star on development about educational development charges. Because one of them said, oh, I'm surprised that the TDSB doesn't collect them. Because there was I don't know if people saw it, but there was a big kind of half-page ad in the paper from the Toronto Catholic District School Board and how they're changing their regulations. So I went back and forth and saying, you know, there's a lot of information on that in financial facts, and here's the link, and go to page whatever. And I noticed that the information on our website has been updated, but there are so many things in it that it's really a gold mine of information, but it's a really dense document. So I don't know how to parse it out, but I'm really thinking that somehow to tell our story, there needs to be pieces of this that are rewritten for community consumption as opposed to researchers who look in documents like that. I have no idea if that can be part of the budget communications, but I'd highly suggest it is, because this, more than any other document, for those that want data and facts, like we're not just complaining, these are the facts in terms of our funding situation. Nothing tells the story better. So through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I'm wondering, after board on March 6th, I think there have to be a couple releases. One should be only on this in budget. And I'm just wondering through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, what they might think about that. And I'd like to congratulate also staff on this. I just really look forward to this updated information every year.
Thank you through the chair. We can definitely take that away and provide some communication with regards to this document.
Anything else, Trustee Laskin? Thank you. Chair Chanas-Lim, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I have some, I just wondered if staff could expand a little bit on the operational expenses around trustee services, our offices, integrity commissioner fees, governance shared services, board admin costs. It's on page 59 of the agenda, and it's the table under administration and governance. It's the second section of that table under operational expenses. I know our trustee salaries actually went down this year, I think. So I guess I wondered if staff could just speak to some of the fluctuations we're seeing. I can understand that during the pandemic, some of our operational costs went down. We've had a huge jump in integrity commissioner fees, and we've got a new model that we're using. So I'm hoping staff can speak a little bit to that. And yet our governance and shared services support line item for this year has gone down significantly in terms of our spending. So I guess I was just wondering about some of that, because it's something sometimes people bring to us. And there's just some curious fluctuations.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'll have to look for a moment to see why the trustee office's compensation went down. It could have been the timing of some of the staff positions that support trustee office, but I will get back to you on that. As far as the operational expenses for the trustee office, that would include your individual allocations that have gone up, as well as, because the actuals are there. Remember, this is a forecast for the current year. The 4 previous years are the actual expenditures that trustees incurred. So you'd expect to see the budget at a higher rate at this point in time, and the actuals most likely to come in below the $274. And then with our integrity commissioner and memberships, we are anticipating a higher usage. The budget that we currently allocate for integrity commissioner, again, maybe less when we actually see the expenditures at the end of the year, but that is the budget that's been allocated to that area, as well as the memberships for the board.
Can anyone remind me of how long our commitment is with this new model of integrity commissioner?
Sorry, I was just talking to my associate. Could I get the question?
I just wonder if anybody knows how long our contract is, our commitment on that? Because we are using a different model, I believe, than we had before in terms of how it's costed, if I'm not mistaken. It's a kind of shocking jump, that's all.
Thank you. Madam Director, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, you are correct that it is a new model of remuneration for services. I believe the contract is 3 or 4 years. However, we would need to confirm that.
Okay, I think it's something we should be keeping an eye on, because, and I get that it's not the actuals yet, but it's roughly double what it's been historically. So that's a bit alarming. Okay, I guess those are just some of my comments. I'm surprised by the fluctuations, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Janislin. Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair, I want to thank staff for the plethora of information here. It's great, and as unlikely as it sounds, my question was just raised by Trustee Chernos-Lynn. With all the data here, we both found the same thing jumping off the page at us to ask about. So I will share the 820 up from 397 for the integrity commissioner's fees and whatnot. That's not what that is? Anyway, it seems high to me, and I don't understand how we get to that, but I understand the trustee thing, so thank you.
Just a comment, Trustee McLean, or do you have a question?
Caroline?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
It wasn't when I put my hand up, but it turned out to be because I got the answers through Trustee Chernos-Lynn.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Trustee Hassan, are you on the list? No? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Vice Chair Diabetes.
Thank you. Again, I'll try and be helpful, so I'll try and refer to the page number. I'm on the digital version of it, so it's page 16 on the document. And that would be our administrative costs. I talk about this sometimes. How do we compare as an organization to other similar organizations? Because we often get people asking us about how, why can't we just cut central staff, right? So we see here administration 2.5% for an organization as large as us. How do we fare?
Through the chair, I would say we fare fairly well, and I would think we're consistent with most public sector organizations across the province.
Okay. Thank you for that. By the way, that's what you call a softball question.
Excellent. Can I have a few more of those, please?
I have a couple of harder questions, but special education, and I asked the question, and we have more data here, right? So page 25 on the report. Right? So 2019-20 actuals, number of students, 48,000 and some. In 2000, then you go forward 5 years, we go down by about 7,000 students. So I guess the question is, if we all continue to get calls from parents and schools about my student, my child needs to get into a program, how come we're seeing a decrease in actual numbers of students receiving special education services?
Thank you, and through the chair, I would ask if Associate Director Sarisco is online.
Thank you very much, and through the chair to Trustee DeVitis. We had a change in our approach in TDSB in indicating a student is receiving programs and supports and services, where we bring that student for consideration to the in-school team meeting and are making sure that that student is receiving instructional supports in class and not automatically being indicated to be receiving supports and services. So it's more of a policy approach for us, and I mean small p policy, in how we are indicating we have a student that we're noticing is not meeting the academic milestones that we are anticipating. So really we're wanting to place the onus on us to do everything that we can from a programmatic perspective to support that student to be making the gains. What I will say, Trustee DeVitis, is that those students are still in our classes, needing the support, but you absolutely have noticed the correct trend. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, I will just share that anecdotally, but then also looking at these numbers, the framework that we're trying to place to make do with the funding that we do have is difficult for folks out there. They're having a really difficult time getting into the spaces that they feel they need to. And you see that in the next page over, as a matter of fact, right? So page 26, you see expenses versus grants, right? So our grants only go up about 20 million, but we increased our spending by 40 million. So obviously, over that span of 5 years, the board has continued to make the decision to find monies it doesn't have to continue to increase the service because the demand is there. And I thought that was very illuminating when I was reading some of the document. So thank you for that to staff. So moving on to a separate subject, I noticed something and capital expenditure. So this would be page 35. The number jumped out at me. Our total expenditures for capital projects, school condition improvements in particular, jumped tremendously. Who do we need to thank for this?
Thank you through the chair. So we have in the past not been spending all of the funding that we receive on an annual basis, and especially through COVID, given supply chain issues, given the ability to do work. So we are playing some catch up from that time. But Executive Officer Pachetti, who is probably on a beach right now, would be very happy to accept your thanks. Her and her team. So thank you.
Please someone pass on the thanks to her, and on behalf of the board, maybe we can buy her a couple of drinks for all the work. More seriously, is the current or the 2002, the amount reported on here, the last year reported on here, is that a sustainable level of funding for capital projects?
Through the chair, we do receive about $350 million annually in capital grant revenue between renewal and school condition improvement grant. And plus the expectation, as we know, is that proceeds of disposition would be able to be used to support capital projects. And so with the passing of the school revitalization strategy, it is absolutely the intention that we at least spend this amount or continue to exceed it in order to meet the goal under the school revitalization strategy.
Through the chair, thank you for that answer. And then I did want to talk about development charges. I have not seen a chart like this before, and it was very, very informative. I would agree with Trustee Lasking on this. So maybe for folks out there that may be paying attention, why don't we get any development charges and some other school boards do?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not qualify for developmental charges because our capacities are lower than the ministry regulated capacity threshold. So therefore, we aren't eligible for EDCs. And EDCs are only to be used to acquire land in new buildings when they are available.
Fair. And so we don't qualify because of provincial regulations around how this works. So even though Toronto went through the biggest building boom probably ever and one of the biggest building booms in the world in the last 20 years, the TDSB has received $0 as part of that development boom.
Yes, because we haven't, and with the school moratorium, we can't close schools, so we can't become eligible. So it's kind of a circle right now. Until the moratorium, we close schools and increase our capacities, we will not be eligible for EDCs currently.
Well, that's a great deal for developers within the city of Toronto. So I'm happy for them that they were able to make more money by not paying taxes because of this regulation change that happened some over 20 years ago. But this is obviously not a great thing for our students because we haven't been able to receive those funds to build new schools, as you say. So thank you, Chair. Those are my questions. I want to thank staff again for the great work that they've done to put this document together. And I would concur that we do need to share some of this information because I feel that the public sometimes doesn't know some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Didivides. And I do have some questions of clarification. Can I pass on the chair?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. To you, Mr. Chair. And we all know absenteeism is a big challenge for everybody. I just want to make sure, and I want to understand, does absenteeism capture in financial facts?
Through the chair, it is, and I will refer to Executive Officer Snyder to direct us to the section of the document.
Through you, Mr. Chair, on page 21 of the document is our supply cost, staff costs, and we break it out between our teachers' supply costs, our educational assistants. We show those total supply costs, and then we show the funding associated with those supply costs and the gap, which is currently about 5.4 million just on these staff alone.
Thank you, Stab. Through you, Mr. Chair, moving along, I have another question on transportation. And what I see in transportation, public transit cost has increased significantly. May I know what is the reason behind that?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to look at the
Page
58.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just trying to find the page number. So the question was why it's increased significantly?
Yeah, public transit cost.
The transit cost, 1 second, where is she hiding? Oh, there we go. That would be increasing, I mean, partially due to fare increases, partially our secondary student population has been increasing, so the number of students that qualify for transportation via public transit would increase. So it's just our share of the costs for providing TTC tickets to the students that qualify for transportation, most of which are in the secondary panel.
Through the chair, we'll take that away because it is a $1.5 million increase on a $500,000 initial amount. So we will follow up and get back to trustees.
Thank you, Associate Director. Through you, Mr. Chair, I have one more question of clarification on information technology. I also see a significant increase in professional development. May I know what is the reason behind that and what are we doing in terms of this increase? Like, what is included in this professional development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd have to go back and do the research, but I believe, as you can see in 21-22, we had a similar large number, and in 22-23, we also got some credits back, probably from the previous year invoicing. But the professional development for the IT department is primarily around the keeping current with the standards and ensuring that they understand the changes in the software environment and the technology area, so they can support our students in their learning, but also to support the infrastructure behind IT to keep current on the trends. But we can get more information on that breakdown for you and put it in Trustee Weekly.
Yeah, and through the chair, I will just add, for the most part, we're looking at comparator numbers that are either during the pandemic or coming out of the pandemic. So during the pandemic, professional development, I think as a whole would have decreased. It wouldn't have even been necessarily offered. A lot of the professional development that our IT department is not internal professional development, it is external, working with our vendors and other third parties. So we can look at that as well, but I believe that it is in returning to pre-pandemic levels. We can take that away.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just one more question for clarification on continuing education. On page 68 of the agenda, item 63, community general interest and seniors daytime. What is that?
So you, Mr. Chair, that would typically be defined as those general interest programs that are not for students of the board. They're interest programs for either our communities or our senior days time.
Thank you, Executive Officer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all for me.
I'll pass the chair back.
Thank you, Vice Chair Diabetes. Trustee Erhard, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I too have very much appreciate this document. I'm still poring over it, so I may have questions when should it get discussed at full board as well. I didn't think I heard it said in the discussion, so I just wanted to draw attention to page 4, the grand total funding gap, which I believe is school-based and central support, is over $200 million. Do I have that number correct on page 4? The difference between what we are asked to provide and funded by the province to provide versus what it costs us. So it's a $200 million gap, roughly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, that's a shocking figure in terms of what it means for us as a board and our ability to deliver what is asked of us by the province and also from families. So it really helps to focus my advocacy. So thank you. And also the $48 million funding gap on page 5 related to unfunded benefits, which has been mentioned this evening. I wanted to just ask quickly about continuing education, night school credits, which have gone up since, it's revised estimates, so it may not be, but in 2019-20, the night school credits, I believe these are for secondary school students, not for adults or elementary. They were at like 5,427, and the estimates are at 10,000 for 23-24. I'm wondering if someone could comment on that growth in particular. I'm also interested in the secondary literacy and math. It also looks to be a significant jump to me as well, from 3,121 to 4,000 estimates. Those are estimates, not actuals. Just wondering if staff have any perspectives to offer on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the 23-24 is our revised estimates of what we currently project in our continuing education department for both the expenses, the other revenues, as well as our net expenses in each area. I would ask Associate Director Sarisco if she had any additional comments she wanted to offer around the night school credits.
Thank you, and through the chair. Trustee Erhard, I would need to take that back to understand why the credit increase, but it is likely we're experiencing a post-pandemic recovery, but I'll have more information for you and be happy to put that through Trustee Weekly.
Okay, thanks. That would be great to gain a better understanding through Trustee Weekly. What I'm really trying to understand through the chair is if we feel that's post-pandemic, or we feel that there's an impact to some of the cuts that have taken place at secondary schools over recently, which may have affected the course availabilities and opportunities by day. So I'm specific, just to gain a better understanding. I fully realize that there's quite a bit of variability, but that stood out to me. And just before my time is up, I also wanted to flag on page 22 the early childhood educator cost. I did earlier this evening speak about the value of ECEs in our JK and SK programs in particular, and just this funding gap is quite pronounced and unfortunate. I know this is a challenge. I think I might just go. I can see my internet is unstable tonight, and so I apologize. Page 22, the significant funding gap for our ECEs as well, and just a note that pay for ECEs is incredibly important, particularly in the city of Toronto. And these are very important staff for our youngest learners. And thank you very much.
Trustee Erhard, is that a comment or?
That through the chair, that last one was a comment. Yes, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions for the staff?
No more questions from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Erhard. Can we have a mover and seconder for this item? Sorry, Chair Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thank you. I thought of a few questions that that had been percolating. I'd forgotten to write them down when I took my notes earlier today. One question I have is, where would we find, one of the challenges we're hearing a lot about in the media, and we've discussed here at board before, are the challenges around security, like IT security, and the dangers around that, like for infiltrations into our system. And looking through this document, where do we account for that in this document?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the cost for our infrastructure around security is part of the IT budget. The information technology is found on page 29 of the report.
But is there a specific line item that goes in, or it's just pulled in? Do we get specific funding?
Most of the costs would be in either supplies and services or the professional and contractual services, and the maintenance fees lines would, as well as software, they'd be distributed among those lines.
Okay. And just to add through the chair, there is no specific funding attached to IT security, and as it becomes more and more important, and we hear more about cybersecurity in general, it is an area where we continue to spend more money and do not receive additional funding.
I almost want, I think that's a gap. I would consider it a gap. It's not considered a gap in this document exactly, but to me it feels a bit like a gap, and a growing one given the seriousness with which we're seeing incidents happening across Canada and across North America. So that's a comment, but just in terms of how we frame things, Trustee DeVitis got to me before I had school condition improvement circled, and he got to that before me. But I mean, I think this is something that the ministry has commented to us regularly about, us not necessarily being able to use our SCI funding. And I know there's been a really concerted effort to change how we do that so that it's year round. And I think we're seeing some of that now. And in fact, I'm actually starting to hear the opposite. People are wanting things done, and it's we can't because we've blown our SCI budget for the year. So I guess it's a good problem, but it feels still like there's so much we need to do. But I think it's amazing and testament to a lot of hard work on the part of staff, but really important changes that need to be made. My final comment is about EDCs. And this stems from a discussion that I was privy to when I went to the OPSPA Board of Directors meeting on Friday night, just listening to, we had sort of our local, central, the trustees got together into our geographical areas to have our update meetings. And we were asked questions about how our budget processes were going. And so it was a chance to listen to the Central East boards talk about how, where they are in their budget, where we are in our budget, and kind of compare how people are doing it. And there was a lot of discussion, or some discussion by other boards who do collect education development charges as to how they use it as an offset. And I hadn't quite thought of it that way, even though I've thought a lot about EDCs and talked a lot about EDCs around this table. But I kind of wonder, just when I look at this document, whether we ought to, in our capital infrastructure or under TLC or somewhere, have a line item that's education development charges and have it as 0,000, and then put an asterisk that goes like kind of how we've done C note, note 1, note 2, like throughout this document, we've done that. I'm just throwing it out there as like an idea just for people to realize, like, our board we have the moratorium, we have the inability to collect EDCs. It presents a huge operational, like our operational budget is challenged by the moratorium. And these are tied together as well. And I just wonder from an advocacy, like just when we're presenting all the facts, other boards presumably, I mean, I haven't looked at other boards' financial facts, but they must have line items for EDCs. And we don't actually have a line item for it, even though it is 0. I feel like it would be important for the public to see it as a 0. It's just something I'm throwing out there for people to consider. I don't know if that's a bad idea or a good idea. I'm looking for feedback, but it occurred to me in light of discussions that I was listening to.
Thank you, and through the chair, we can take that into account when we can make even a change to this document, but we can also, through the capital budget, just highlight that we don't receive EDCs. And just from a EDC perspective as well, many boards are more than one municipality, so when they experience growth in different parts of their board, they are eligible to collect EDCs in maybe some areas and not other areas, where because we fall under one municipality, and even though we have pockets of growth and pockets where we have excess capacity, because EDCs are looked at as a whole, it impacts our ability to collect them. So that's why I'd say there's also a little bit of challenge in comparing us to other boards is that they have that ability when there are pockets of growth in specific areas to maybe adjust them through EDC.
So through the chair, I appreciate those comments, and I think that's one of the challenges we have with amalgamation, right? That when we were amalgamated and, when you look at the way EDCs are calculated, where you have to hit 5 years of 100% growth before it triggers that levy across your whole board. Although I don't know how it works with how that ties in with the municipalities, actually, now that I think about it. But at least for us, that's my understanding of how it works. It doesn't change the fact that we aren't able to collect them. Like, yes, if we were divided up into 4 quadrants, maybe it would change things, or, different areas of the city, it certainly would change things probably. But the fact of the matter is we get 0. And if it's not exactly calculating it, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we look at how much, I mean, I would love to put in that chart how much our coterminous board collects, but I understand like the dynamics of that would not be necessarily productive. But I think the fact that we get 0 and that other boards can use that to offset pieces is something that the public should be aware of. Not necessarily stating that other boards do that, but just having it as a line item, in my mind, at least somewhere. And I think we ought to consider that when we do our budget too. Like, just that we think about what are potential offsets that other people use that we might be able to creatively use, just from a political point of view. Anyways.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, we can take that away. Thank
you, Chair Chanaslin. Your time is up. Do you want to go back on the list? No? Thank you. Anybody else? Can I have a mover and seconder for this item? 6.2. Trustee McLean, Trustee Laskin.
Sean in favor.
Trustee Arts in favor.
Trustee Lee think Markham absent is not there. And item 6.2 carries. Moving along, item 6.3, budget webinars.
Thank you, and through the chair, staff wanted to provide an update on the budget webinars that occurred last week. We did do 2 virtual webinars. We had about 40 to 50 participants in each webinar. The presentation is attached as Appendix A to the report. Because there were not as many participants as maybe we've seen in the past, we did have an opportunity to answer all of the questions that were posed at the webinar, and the questions and answers are included in Appendix B. I would just say that some of the themes of the questions included questions about absenteeism, special education. There were some capital-related questions. And then there were a number of questions about advocacy that staff really directed to have conversations with trustees if they were looking for how they could help to advocate and who to advocate to. So I just wanted to highlight that for trustees as well, that there is an interest in having that information. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Associate Director. We have a speakers list. We have Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. Have we had a second sober thought on any sort of budget survey? I thought it was actually coming in February. Are we not doing it this year? Through you to staff.
Through the chair, when we looked at the information that could be received through the budget survey, because there weren't specific items that we were looking at, we thought that the timing of the survey wasn't appropriate at this time, and that we would look to see if the survey after the options to balance is the, if there is any information that could be garnered through a survey once we have more information, or if there's other surveys that, like we did last year, that would help us in the advocacy piece.
Then through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, can we get an updated infographic then that that's just about the public deputations? Because that seems to then be the only thing left, because the webinars are done, the survey was in February, and in order to ensure our folks know, it would be best to have something current. So just what's left to have happen. And if that could come this week, that would be great to make sure people have lots of time to sign up for deputing to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, we will work with communications on updating the graphics.
Anything else, Trustee Laskin?
No, thank you.
Good. I need a mover and seconder for the item. Got Trustee Hassan and Trustee Vice Chair Diamandis.
It's not coming up for me, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor.
Trustee Arts in favor.
Cherneslin in favor, same problem.
Shan left, absent. And it carried. Before we adjourn, I would like to thank staff on behalf of the FPEC committee and wish everyone a safe home drive and good night. And I need a mover and seconder for adjournment. Trustee McLean and Chair Cherneslin.
All in favor?
Show of hands. And trustees who are online, just say, anybody against? How is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, it carried. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.